In the last few months, regional and international media focused on Sri Lanka's worsening economic crisis. Did the policy decisions taken by the Sri Lankan governments in the last few decades expose the Sri Lankan economy more seriously to shocks like the COVID pandemic? How do academics and thinkers discuss the economy in the public sphere? What are the realistic choices facing the current government? How to explain the economic challenge Sri Lanka is currently facing, and the long-term political economic trends behind the present. This is the most serious crisis Sri Lanka has faced since independence in 1948. 1930's current status. In a way, it is similar to the era when Sri Lanka suffered from the effects of the Great Depression and the malaria epidemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a health emergency and significant economic loss, whereas the current economic crisis facing Sri Lanka is the result of a broad and long-term process with a long history. The plague itself. Since the implementation of economic liberalization policies in the 1970s, Sri Lanka's economy has always been in crisis. Tens of thousands of workers were thrown out of their jobs and free trade zones were established that limited workers' ability to organize. This attack was so strong that the labor movement has not yet recovered from the setback. This politico-economic change, accompanied by autocratic rule and pro-market economic policies, was what called a decade ago the second wave of neoliberalism in Sri Lanka. It is this second wave, characterized by intensifying financialization, that has pushed Sri Lanka into its current crisis. This crisis has been accelerated by the fall of the plague. Many issues are discussed in the public conversation about the economic crisis, from agricultural policies to trade regulations, from fiscal policy to foreign debt. Can some of the symptoms of the economic crisis be separated from their roots? The economic policies of the last few decades have affected all sectors. Various problems affecting different sectors of the economy have evolved over time. For example, if we take the agricultural policies adopted after the economic liberalization of our country, we can observe a gradual decline in the government's investment in agriculture. Sri Lanka's macroeconomic policy has focused on infrastructure development, real estate sector promotion, and tourism with the cooperation of foreign capital. But aspects like small-scale agriculture and food self-sufficiency have been neglected. That is why it is necessary to look at different sectors like agriculture and see the changes in these sectors as a result of the neoliberal economic policy package. Finally, what should Sri Lanka do in the current economic climate? Considering the value of Sri Lanka's trade, which is 80% higher than imports and exports, it appears that whatever development policy is adopted, if the external market is allowed to function independently, it will take a long time. The value of imports equals the value of exports. The government has no choice but to restrict imports and change the composition of imports to give priority to essential goods like food, medicine, and intermediate goods like fuel, which are important for production and domestic consumption and exports. To prioritize these tax imports, the government should create a state-based distribution system. Then the import responsibility should be taken over by the government. Otherwise, private businessmen continue to import luxury goods as they have been doing for the past 2 years. Private traders cannot be expected to prioritize imports. Now we see how fights are emerging from different parts of the society based on different demands. Professional struggles, peasant agitations are examples. The future will be determined by how the working people present their demands and how the elites and ruling classes respond to them. The extravagant life led by Sri Lanka's elite over the last 4 decades, their sloppy capital accumulation and overconsumption took place for the welfare of the working sections of the population such as garment factory workers, tea plantation workers, migrant domestic workers, and informal sector workers. But this path has reached its logical end. Our future will be determined by the class struggle, hidden behind the devastation caused by the pandemic, but emerging with the growing economic crisis. Thank you for watching my video.